Rain pelted the rusted roof of the small mud house as Kioni scrubbed the last trace of ash from the cooking pot. His hands were raw, fingers trembling, but he dared not stop. Any sign of delay, and his stepmother would find another reason to strike. "Are you done, boy?" a shrill voice called from inside. "Yes, Mama," Kioni whispered. The door creaked open. Ruth, his stepmother, stepped out with a smirk. "Good, because someone's coming to take you away tomorrow." Kioni blinked, confused. "Take me?" "A wealthy family in Nairobi. They need a houseboy. You're going." Ruth tossed a faded shirt at him. "Wear this. Look useful." Kioni's heart sunk. He was only 14. His parents were long gone, swallowed by the flash floods that swept through their village years ago. Ruth had taken him in only for the monthly stipend from a church charity that supported orphans. That night, he lay awake on his thin mat, staring at the cracked ceiling. He remembered his father's deep laugh, his mother's voice humming old Kikuyu songs as she cooked. Tomorrow, he would belong to strangers. He didn't know their names, only that his freedom would end at dawn. The next morning, a dusty matatu stopped in front of a tall white gate with golden initials engraved, N.M. Kioni stepped off, clutching a small plastic bag that held all he owned, 2 shirts and a photo of his parents. The gate swung open, revealing a long driveway paved with marble tiles and a mansion that gleamed like a dream he couldn't afford. A tall man in a black uniform waited by the door, expressionless. "You're the new boy?" he asked. Kioni nodded. "Yes, sir." "Follow me. Don't talk unless spoken to. Don't touch what you shouldn't." Inside, the air smelled of polish and flowers. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, and the staircase curved like a snake. At the top stood a woman in a flowing gown, her voice smooth but sharp. "You must be the village boy," she said. "I'm Mrs. Mwangi. You'll work in the laundry and serve my son. If he likes you, you stay. If not," she shrugged, "we'll send you back." Kioni bowed slightly, his heart thudding. He didn't know yet that her son, Adrian Mwangi, was nothing like he imagined, and that his arrival in this house would uncover secrets darker than the night. Adrian Mwangi was nothing like the picture Kioni had painted in his mind. He wasn't a quiet, polite city boy as Kioni had imagined. He was sharp-eyed, restless, and carried himself with a confidence that filled every room. When Kioni met him that evening, Adrian was lounging on a cream sofa, phone in hand, music blasting through wireless speakers. "So, you're the new help?" Adrian asked without looking up. "Yes, sir," Kioni replied quickly. "Don't call me sir, I'm not old. Call me Adrian," he said flatly. "But don't forget who's in charge here." Kioni nodded. Adrian finally looked up, studying him from head to toe. "You're quieter than the last boy. Good. I don't like noise." Days turned into weeks, and Kioni learned every detail of Adrian's routine. He knew how Adrian liked his sneakers cleaned, how he wanted his smoothie blended, and the exact spot on his desk where his tablet always sat. But behind Adrian's polished appearance was something unsettling. His laughter never reached his eyes. His friends whispered behind his back when they visited. Even his mother seemed wary of him at times. At first, Kioni thought he was imagining things, until the night Adrian caught him reading an old newspaper in the laundry room. "Where did you learn to read?" Adrian asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "My father taught me," Kioni replied softly. Adrian stared for a moment, then simply turned and walked away. That night, Kioni noticed the faint bruises on Adrian's knuckles and the emptiness in his stare. Then came the slap. It happened 3 days later over something small, a glass of juice that spilled near the rug. Adrian's palm came fast and hard across Kioni's face. "Do you have any idea how much this carpet costs?" he shouted. Tears stung Kioni's eyes, but he bit his lip, saying nothing. Later, Mrs. Mwangi summoned him to the kitchen. "You embarrassed my son. One more mistake, and you'll go back to the gutter you came from." That night, Kioni lay in his small storeroom, his cheeks still throbbing, but beneath the pain, something else burned. Anger. Not just at Adrian or his mother, but at the world that had turned him into a servant of people who saw him as dirt. He stared at the ceiling and whispered to himself, "I won't stay silent forever." The next morning, Kioni woke before sunrise. He scrubbed the floors until his knees ached, polished the silverware until his reflection stared back, and folded Adrian's clothes with trembling precision. He didn't want another outburst, but the silence in the mansion felt heavier than ever. Adrian barely spoke, and when he did, it was sharp, cold, and meant to remind Kioni of his place. Still, Kioni noticed things, the way Adrian avoided mirrors, the faint sounds coming from his locked bedroom at night, and how his laughter sometimes turned into murmurs he seemed unaware of. One afternoon, while dusting Adrian's study, Kioni found a leather-bound notebook on the desk. It wasn't locked. Curiosity fought with fear. He hesitated, then opened it. The first few pages were filled with school notes, but the next entries chilled him. Adrian had written about his classmates, cruel observations, threats, and plans to expose their secrets. One line stood out. "The houseboy knows too much. If he talks, I'll deal with him." Kioni's heart raced. He shut the notebook quickly and placed it exactly where he found it. That night, he barely slept. The following evening, as Kioni folded Adrian's clothes, Adrian appeared at the door, watching him silently. "You didn't touch anything in my room, did you?" he asked. Kioni froze, his mind screaming. No, Adrian." Adrian's lips curved into a faint smirk. "Good, because I don't like liars." His eyes lingered too long before he turned away. From that moment, Kioni knew something had shifted. He felt it in every glance, every step. The air itself seemed to be warning him. Days passed in uneasy quiet. Then one morning, chaos erupted. The family laptop had gone missing. Mrs. Mwangi summoned Kioni to the living room, her face tight with fury. "You were the last one in the study," she snapped. "I didn't take anything, Ma," Kioni said quickly. "Then explain this," she barked, showing him security footage. It showed Kioni entering the study, but not leaving. His breath caught. The footage had been edited. "I swear I didn't." "Enough," she yelled. Adrian stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. By nightfall, Kioni was locked in the storeroom, with no food, no water, and no chance to defend himself. He sat in the dark, whispering to himself, "Why are you doing this?" The house creaked around him. Outside, the rain returned, pelting the roof like it had the night his old life ended. But this time, Kioni knew something was deeply wrong in that mansion. By morning, Kioni's head pounded from hunger. The door finally opened, and the guard tossed him a piece of bread before walking away without a word. Kioni devoured it quickly, his throat burning. Hours later, Mrs. Mwangi appeared, expression stiff. "The laptop was found under the couch," she said flatly, "but don't think you're off the hook." She turned and left before he could respond. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. From the corner of his eye, Kioni saw Adrian leaning against the hallway wall, watching him with a faint smile. That look said everything. It hadn't been a mistake. It had been a warning. That evening, a new staff member arrived. Her name was Nia, a talkative girl around Kioni's age, full of energy and questions. "You've been here long, right?" she asked as they washed dishes side by side. Kioni nodded cautiously. "I heard the Mwangis are complicated," she whispered. "Especially the son." Kioni didn't reply, But Nia continued, her voice dropping lower. I saw him last night, talking to himself in front of the mirror. He was angry, like he was arguing with someone who wasn't there. Kioni froze. The same noises he'd heard, the same unease. You must have imagined it, he muttered, though his voice trembled. No, Nia said firmly. There's something wrong with him, and I think you know it too. That night, Nia knocked on Kioni's door, whispering through the thin wood. We could leave, together. I heard of a safe place near Thika. They help kids like us. Kioni stared into the dark. If we run and they find us, it'll be worse. Then we plan, she said softly. We can't stay forever. The next morning, Adrian announced a surprise trip to their family estate in Naivasha. Only Nia and Kioni were chosen. Mrs. Mwangi smiled as if proud, but Kioni felt dread coil in his stomach. Something wasn't right. That night, Adrian invited Kioni to the parlor. You've lasted longer than most, he said, staring into the fire. Do you know why? Kioni shook his head slowly. Adrian leaned closer. But curiosity kills, Kioni. The next day began with an eerie quiet. The Naivasha estate stretched over acres of open land with scattered trees and a lake glimmering at the distance. It should have been peaceful, yet every corner of it carried a strange weight. Naya and Kioni were told to clean the east wing while Adrian went out for business. The housekeeper, an older woman with hollow eyes, warned them not to wander near the basement. When Kioni asked why, she only whispered, because he doesn't like it when people go there. That afternoon, while sweeping the corridor, Naya accidentally dropped her broom. It rolled down a narrow hallway that ended in a locked iron door. From the crack below it came a faint humming sound, like someone whispering prayers or chanting. Naya's curiosity flared, but Kioni grabbed her arm. "Leave it," he said sharply. "Please." She frowned, but stepped back. That night, he couldn't sleep. The same humming returned, louder this time, mixed with soft tapping, like knuckles brushing against wood. At dawn, Kioni followed the sound. It led to the same iron door. The padlock was missing now, swinging loosely. His hand trembled as he pushed it open. A narrow stairway descended into darkness. He lit a candle and stepped down slowly. The air grew colder, heavier. At the bottom, he found a small room with shelves of glass jars filled with strange symbols carved into the lids. In the center lay a notebook bound in black leather. When he opened it, his breath caught. It was Adrian's handwriting, pages filled with drawings of eyes, faces, and names, some crossed out, others circled in red. Under one name, faint but legible, was his own, Kioni. Next. He stumbled back, heart racing. Behind him, a voice spoke softly, calm and close. You shouldn't have come here. Adrian stood in the doorway, holding a knife that glinted under the candlelight. Kioni's breath caught in his throat as Adrian stepped forward, the knife glimmering faintly. The candle's flame trembled between them, throwing wild shadows across the walls. What is this place? Kioni whispered. Adrian tilted his head, smiling faintly. A place for truth, he said, where people show who they really are. He circled Kioni slowly, eyes sharp and unblinking. You think you're innocent, but you've been watching me since the day you arrived. Don't you know that has a cost? Kioni's heart pounded so loudly it drowned out his thoughts. He edged backward until his back hit the cold wall. Adrian raised the knife, but instead of striking, he placed it on the table. I'm not going to hurt you, not yet, but you will help me finish what I started. Then he leaned closer, whispering words that made Kioni's blood run cold. Every servant who came before you tried to leave. They thought they could run, but this house doesn't forget. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from above, Nia's voice calling his name. Kioni, are you down there? Adrian's expression darkened. He blew out the candle, plunging them into blackness. You tell her nothing, not one word. Then, as if nothing had happened, he guided Kioni back upstairs. When they emerged, Nia stood waiting with a lantern. Her eyes widened when she saw Adrian behind him. I told him to fetch some cleaning rags, Kioni said quickly. Adrian smiled faintly, his tone smooth. Good. You should both get some rest. Tomorrow we'll be busy. That night, Kioni couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the notebook, the names, the symbols, the way Adrian had said, this house doesn't forget. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed of the iron doors slamming shut and his own name being crossed out in red. He woke to screams echoing through the hallway. It was Nia. Kioni jumped from his bed and raced toward the sound. Naya's scream came from the hallway near the east wing. When he reached her, she was standing in front of the mirror, trembling. It moved, she whispered, pointing at her reflection. Kioni frowned, still panting. What do you mean it moved? She turned to him, eyes wide. My reflection, it smiled at me before I did. The air in the corridor felt colder now, heavy with something unseen. Before Kioni could respond, Adrian appeared behind them in his dark robe, looking calm, almost amused. Having bad dreams, Naya? He asked. His voice was soft, but carried an authority that silenced her immediately. He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her away. Go back to bed. The mind plays tricks at night. As she left reluctantly, Adrian turned to Kioni. You should rest too, he said. Tomorrow we travel to the village nearby. My father needs to see you. Then he walked off without another word. The next morning, a black SUV waited outside. Mrs. Mwangi was already seated inside, looking distant. They drove through miles of dusty road until they reached a remote village surrounded by forest. There, Adrian's father, a stern man with gray hair and a wooden walking stick, waited outside a large hut. His presence was commanding. So this is the boy, he said slowly, his gaze heavy, the one from the orphanage. Yes, father, Adrian replied. The old man studied Kioni for a long moment. You're stronger than the others. That's good. Then he turned to Adrian. He might be the one. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Kioni overheard fragments of their conversation. Words like initiation, inheritance, and sacrifice. The tone was calm, deliberate, too deliberate. Later that night, Naya found him outside the hut, eyes wide with fear. We have to go, she said, gripping his arm tightly. I saw something in the hut, something not human. Before Kioni could respond, a deep voice spoke behind them. You shouldn't be here after dark. It was Adrian's father. Kioni froze as the old man's voice echoed through the dimly lit compound. Adrian's father stepped into the moonlight, his face stern but eerily calm. The walking stick he carried was carved with strange markings that glowed faintly under the pale light. Where were you going, boy? He asked, his tone heavy with quiet authority. Nia stammered something about needing air, but Kioni stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. We couldn't sleep, sir. The old man's eyes lingered on him for a long moment before he nodded slowly. Sleep is a rare gift in this house. Treasure it while you can. Then he turned and walked back toward the hut. His shadow stretched unnaturally long across the ground before fading into the darkness. As soon as he disappeared, Nia whispered urgently, "He was doing something inside that hut. There's a circle drawn on the floor, and candles all around it. And bones, Kioni, real bones." Her voice cracked. "Whatever they're planning, it's not normal." Kioni's hands trembled. The memory of the symbols in the basement flashed in his mind. The same patterns, the same strange markings. "We'll leave tomorrow before sunrise. If we wait, we'll never get another chance." That night, he barely slept. When dawn finally came, he and Nia packed what little they had and crept toward the forest path. The compound was silent except for distant bird song. But just as they reached the edge of the trees, Adrian stepped out from behind an acacia trunk, blocking their way. He was smiling faintly, but his eyes were cold. "You think you can just walk away?" he said softly. "My father chose you for a reason." Nia stepped back, clutching Kioni's arm. "We're not staying," she said, her voice shaking. Adrian's smile widened. "Then you'll die outside, not inside." He raised his hand, and from behind the trees, 2 guards emerged, dragging heavy ropes. Kioni's heart raced as the guards closed in. The ropes looked rough, stained, and used before. Naya's grip on his arm tightened until her nails dug into his skin. Adrian took a slow step forward, eyes glowing faintly in the early dawn light. "I told you," he said in a calm, almost gentle voice. "This house doesn't forget, and neither does my father." Kioni scanned the area, searching for a way out. Behind Adrian, the forest grew dense and shadowed, but there was a narrow path leading toward the lake. He leaned toward Naya and whispered, "Run when I say." She nodded faintly, her breath shaky. When the first guard reached for him, Kioni picked a cloud of dust into his eyes and bolted toward the trees. "Now!" he shouted. Naya ran beside him, the dry branches snapping under their feet. Shouts erupted behind them, followed by pounding footsteps. They ran until the trees grew thicker and the sunlight faded. Finally, they stopped by the lake, gasping for air. "We can't go back," Naya said, eyes wide with fear. "They'll find us." Kioni looked toward the water, noticing something strange. A small wooden shrine standing half submerged, decorated with old beads and bones. Carved into its surface were the same symbols he had seen in the basement. "They've been doing this for years, not just in that house, this whole land." Before he could finish, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Adrian's voice followed, calm and distant. "You can run, but the house always calls its own." Moments later, the surface of the lake rippled unnaturally. A soft humming began, the same chant Kioni had heard beneath the iron door. The shrine started to glow faintly. Naya grabbed his hand. "Kioni, we have to go now!" But before they could move, a dark shape rose slowly from the water, something tall, thin, and impossibly still, with eyes that mirrored Adrian's smile. The water around the figure churned as if boiling, though the air remained cold. Kioni couldn't move. The thing that rose from the lake wasn't human, yet it bore a faint resemblance to Adrian. Same face, same calm smile, but stretched, hollow, and colorless. Its eyes gleamed like pieces of glass, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like many voices whispering together. "You were chosen," it said. "Don't resist the calling." Nia screamed and pulled Kioni backward. "It's not real," she shouted, though her voice betrayed her fear. But when the figure stepped onto the shore, The ground beneath them shuddered. Mud splashed onto their legs as they stumbled away. "You shouldn't have touched the book," the creature continued. "It marked you." Kioni's mind raced. He remembered the symbols, the notebook, the way his name was written in red. He grabbed Nia's hand and ran toward the forest path again. But the trees ahead had shifted, thicker, tangled, as if the forest itself had closed in. Behind them, Adrian appeared, calm and untouched by the chaos. "You can't run from the truth," he said softly. "That's not a monster. It's a reflection. It's what this family becomes when we refuse our duty." Kioni turned to him, voice breaking. "You're insane. You're sacrificing people for your family's curse." Adrian smiled faintly. "Curse?" he echoed. "No, boy. This is inheritance." The lake creature raised its hand, and the air filled with a low hum again, vibrations that made the trees tremble. Kioni clutched her head, screaming as the sound grew unbearable. In a rush of panic, Kioni grabbed a nearby branch and swung it at Adrian. The branch cracked against his shoulder, and Adrian staggered back, eyes burning with fury. "Run!" Kioni yelled. They sprinted into the forest, branches tearing at their clothes. Behind them, the chanting grew louder, echoing through the trees. And then, suddenly, the sound stopped. When they looked back, both Adrian and the creature were gone. Only the lake shimmered under the pale morning sun. Calm, still, and silent. But carved into the nearest tree, freshly scratched into the bark, was a single word: return. The forest was silent, except for the sound of their breathing. Kioni leaned against a tree, sweat and fear mixing down his face. Nia sat beside him, clutching her knees. "We can't go back," she whispered. "Not after what we saw." Kioni nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the carved word, return. The edges were wet, as though the tree itself had bled. He stepped closer, tracing the letters with his finger. The bark pulsed faintly beneath his touch, like a living heartbeat. He pulled back instantly. "We're not safe here," he said quietly. "That thing, it's not just from the lake. It's connected to them." They followed a narrow path deeper into the woods, guided by the faint orange light of dawn. After nearly an hour of walking, they reached a deserted roadside. In the distance, an old fuel station stood abandoned. They hid inside, resting beside a rusted generator. For the first time in days, they could hear nothing. No chants, no footsteps, no whispers. Nia broke the silence. "What if this isn't over? What if it follows us?" Kioni hesitated. "Then we find help. Someone outside that family must know what's happening." He paused, recalling the name scrawled on one of the notebook's pages. Father Okath. It was written differently from the others, not crossed out, as if marked for something else. There was a name in Adrian's book. Maybe he knows. They waited until evening, then began walking toward the nearest village, hoping someone could lead them to the man. As they approached, the smell of cooking fires and the distant hum of evening prayers filled the air. For a moment, the world seemed normal again. But as they entered the village square, an old woman selling herbs looked up sharply, her wrinkled face tightening. "You came from the Mwangi house, didn't you?" she said. Kioni froze. "How did you—" The woman shook her head slowly. "No one escapes that place for long." She pointed toward the dark road leading out of the village. "If you value your life, find Father Okath before the moon reaches its highest point. The boy with the mirror eyes will come for you." Nia's voice trembled. The boy with the mirror eyes? She means Adrian. Kioni's stomach turned cold. Somewhere behind them, in the quiet, a faint humming began again. The night air grew heavy as Kioni and Nia followed the dirt road the old woman had pointed to. The moon was high, pale and distant, casting silver light on the narrow path. Every few steps, Kioni glanced back, half expecting to see Adrian's shadow behind them. But there was only darkness and the faint hum of insects. They walked for almost an hour before reaching a small church on a hilltop. Its wooden cross leaned slightly, and one of its doors hung crookedly on rusted hinges. Candlelight flickered faintly from inside. They stepped in, calling softly, "Father Okoth?" A thin man in his 60s turned from the altar. His robes were faded, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Who sent you?" he asked. Kioni hesitated before answering. "We came from the Mwangi estate. Adrian and his father, there's something wrong there." Father Okoth's expression darkened instantly. "You should never have gone near that place," he said quietly. "That family carries an ancient debt. Long ago, their ancestor made a covenant with something from the lake. It promised them power and wealth, but it demanded blood in return." Nia clutched her chest. "We saw it," she whispered. "The thing in the water." The priest nodded grimly. "It feeds on chosen souls. The marks on your name mean you were next." He took a small vial of oil and a wooden cross, then motioned them forward. "We can break it, but you must stay inside the church until dawn." Kioni nodded, but before the priest could begin, the doors burst open. Adrian stood there, pale, eyes gleaming silver like mirrors. "You shouldn't have run. You were meant to stay with us." The candlelight flickered violently as the air grew cold. Father Okoth raised the cross, chanting in Kiswahili, his voice firm. "Leave this child," he commanded. Adrian screamed, a sound that was both human and not. The floor trembled and shadows poured from his body like smoke. The walls cracked and the moonlight cut through the darkness. Adrian collapsed, lifeless, as the humming faded away completely. When dawn came, the lake was still. The Mwangi estate burned to the ground that same morning. Father Okoth placed a hand on Kioni's shoulder. "It is finished," he said softly. Kioni looked toward the rising sun, tired but alive. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful. But deep in the ashes of the Mwangi estate, under the charred remains of the parlor, a single word glowed faintly in red. Await.